Hey everyone. Missing the slides. Oh, maybe I should turn off my computer. That's a good idea. There we go. All right. Hello everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed your lunch and are ready to kick off the last afternoon here at SourceCon. I want to start the session with talking about WebdriverIO. And I've been working on this project for like 4 years now. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about this today. And it's funny, every time I meet Titus Fortner, who's the contributor to the Ruby bindings, Selenium bindings, and maintainer of the Water project, when we talk about test automation, he's always like, well, in Ruby we do it like, do what I say instead of do what you mean. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, in WebdriverIO we do it more like this and that. So we argument ourselves with the bindings and projects that we build. Short introduction to my person. My name is Christian. I work as a software engineer at Source Labs. I work in the DevTools team. So a small shameless plug, at 2:30, there was going to be a talk here in this room about the extended debugging and the custom commands that we have built there. So you might want to check that out. If you have any questions about anything that I say here during the talk, shoot me a message on Twitter, or when you're interested in any of the slides that I have here, I will publish them on GitHub afterwards. All right, let's get started. So the whole journey began in 2011 when a guy called Camilo Tapia, a guy from Sweden, pushed the project to NPM and GitHub that allowed automating browser in Node.js, which was really awesome. I was back then in university and was looking for a project that allowed me to test my heavy JavaScript-based application. And this thing actually allowed me to do that. I started contributing to it because I was really excited. And eventually, Camilo stepped away, and I took over the whole maintenance work. And I think since then, I have rewritten the whole code base 4 times and tried to make it better and better. Yeah, and thanks to this guy, I stepped into the space of test automation, and I'm now able to do all this exciting stuff. So even though, I have to mention, even though we are here at SourceCon and I work at Source Labs, this project is completely community-based. So everyone who's contributing to it is doing it on his free time, including mine. Since September last year, WebdriverIO is part of the JS Foundation, which is also pretty exciting. But there's, of course, other projects on the NPM ecosystem. Especially NPM, it's crazy. They're a package for basically everything. And you can use so many packages out there to do your test automation. I picked like 5 of the most used one, which is WD, a project that is still maintained by the Appium team, WebdriverIO. Then there's Protector, a tool that is built by a team at Google. They use the Selenium bindings for their browser automation. Then there's Nightwatch, and of course Selenium. I want to mention here that all these numbers, they might look interesting, but they don't really tell you anything about the state of the quality of each individual project. So if you are considering writing your test in Node.js, I really recommend to build a POC for 2 or 3 different packages and see whatever you feel comfortable with building your tests, because you don't want to end up having to change that after you build your test suite up. Oh, sorry, that was too fast. Couple of download numbers here. There's Nightwatch with WebdriverIO with 25,000. Like Protector is still up on top, and I hope WebdriverIO will get to this number. I literally check these stats every day to see how WebdriverIO is doing, but that's just me being crazy. But yeah, what I intentionally left out the Selenium bindings here and WD because they are more utility projects that allow you to do the browser automation. There has to be something that allows you to test your application with it, that gives you a test framework. Protector, for instance, does that for the Selenium bindings. WebdriverIO has its own implementation of all the bindings. And what that means is WebdriverIO is completely focused on testing, not only on automation. And it comes with a variety of features that, in my opinion, are really important if you want to build up a scalable end-to-end test suite. There are, for one, reporters. And WebdriverIO comes with a lot of custom reporters. And the reason why it doesn't use the native ones that come with Mocha, Jasmine, or Cucumber is that the WebdriverIO reporters are specialized for end-to-end testing. They give you information about the capabilities you run your test with, and for instance, session ID. I know the spec reporter gives you a link to a Source Labs job if something is up. So all the unit test reporters don't do that, and those information are really important if you want to find what browser has caused what problems. There's a test runner that is really important that allows you to run your tests in parallel to reduce your testing time. The configuration management is important in order to give you the opportunity to build tests that are specific for a variety of environments. You have your development environment on your local machine. Then you have a staging environment that you test on your CI system, and then something like post-deploy tests. And each individual environment requires a different setup, a different set of browsers that you want to use. And so certain configuration management is here necessary. Assertions, of course, WebdriverIO has custom assertions packages, but of course you can use any arbitrary assertion library that is out there on NPM. Extendability, WebdriverIO has plugins that you can put in and that do jobs for you that you don't want to do by yourself. For instance, starting a browser driver, or there's a service that allows you to do crazy screenshot automation, that kind of stuff. Debugging, important. We have a debug command. And WebdriverIO can also support native Node.js debugging in your IDE or on DevTools, which I will show later. CLI, of course, you can use a command line interface to specify certain specs that you want to run. Setup and teardown, really important. Your tests don't want to be concerned about, hey, create a session for me and tear it down. That all is encapsulated so that your tests are really just concentrating on your functional test. Integration, WebdriverIO is not only able to run with Grunt and Gulp, but there's a lot of other projects that have WebdriverIO integrated. A popular example is Spectron, a package built by a team at GitHub to test Electron applications. And I just got an email this morning by Adam Cerny, the CTO of Applitools, and he told me that there's now an SDK to use WebdriverIO with the Applitools interface, which is, I think, really awesome. A watch mode, you save your application, you save your test, and the test automatically reruns. And test hooks. Test hooks allow you to interfere into the test process at any given point in time. So, for instance, after your test, you want to check if the test has failed in order to grab all the logs from the browser and see if there was any JavaScript error happen. But how does it look like in code? I prepared a small demo project that I want to show you that only has tests, and I want to show you or demonstrate. Oh, sorry. I want to demonstrate you how I would set up a test suite with WebdriverIO for a project. So as you can see on the left side, I have 3 different WebdriverIO config files. And the reason for that is I want to have a config file for each individual environment. So I have one main config file where I put all my information about all environments. So something that never changes over time. For instance, the framework that I use and a couple of Mocha options, right? Then I have a local config that I want to use when I only run tests locally on my machine. For instance, here I'm only concerned about one browser at a time, so I only have concurrency set to 1. I have capability, I only use Chrome as a browser, and since I use Chrome driver as a service, so Chrome is automatically starting up without, so that I don't have to do anything. And I use the DevTools service to grab some more debugging information from the browser. my CI configuration looks a little bit different. There I have a user and a key defined because I want to run my tests on Source Labs. I have max instances set to 20 because I want to run tests in parallel as much as possible. And of course, I am concerned about more browsers in my CI system because that's the ultimate environment where I want to run all my tests in. And the source service integration, because that allows me to give certain context in my, on my job details page at source. And I could use a functionality there that would allow me to automatically start source connect if I want to. Looking in the tests, oh yeah, you might be interested how I got to use the import statement in the configuration. I see that question a lot in the Jitter channel. So the way you can do this is you create in your NPM package a WDIO command, and you call node with a -r, and say, I want to require Babel register before I run anything. And Babel register then is responsible for transpiling the WD config down to the current node project that you are using. So you can use all the good stuff of ECMAScript 6 in your config as well. Looking in your test, you see that I'm heavily invested into page object. And the reason why, I want to give here in a minute. I hope that doesn't crash down. Probably does. OK, so I'm using page object because they allow me to separate all the page information from my test. And that is important because I don't want to pollute all the test with all the details of my page itself. So it allows me to really make really low interaction with my application and abstract this away in a high level. The page object should contain all static information about the page. That would include selectors and certain methods that give me the opportunity to interact with the page object. And ideally, and this is what I always keep in mind when I build page objects, is it should be possible that at any given point in time, someone comes and completely redesigns your page. And then in order to make your end-to-end test work again, you should only touch your page object at the end. And your test should be fine. Of course, a page object can represent literally anything that you want to abstract away, not only a page. So I like to use page objects to abstract away modals or certain forms on my page so that my tests always look clean and I don't have to be concerned about any automation code in my test. So this is how it looks like. I have a page object, and they're used to have an open method, so it opens me the page, and I don't need to know what page it actually gets opened. That is all included in the page object. Looking into the page object, I do it similarly with the config files. I have one main page object where everything is, well, this is pretty sparse, but there usually includes anything that is included in all pages as well. So there's usually some selectors or elements that occur on many pages, and you don't want to redefine them in each individual page object. You want to have them at one position where you can use it in all other page objects as well. The way you do it is you extend your specific page object with the main page object. And that specific page object then has a variety of additional selectors that are really specific for the abstracted element of the page object. Getting into the debugging part, before this session, I opened a test that is running right now. And this test got to this point where the browser debug command is sitting. And the browser debug command is great in order to give you the opportunity to debug the application at the point where the command is called. So I hope it is still open. So you see the terminal, and this is the browser that this session is running. So I can now use the browser object to do anything on my terminal. So I can be like browser.url. http sourcecon.com, and it opens me the SourceCon page. And then I can go ahead and, I don't know, say browser.get title, and it returns the title. So any command that is available on the browser API or on WebdriverIO, I can use here in this command line. However, not many people like to work on the command line, right? It's not really feels native as a web developer. So I also started the session with, let me see where's the package JSON, with -- inspect. And that triggers Node to start up a server that can talk to the DevTools application. So if the debugger statement then gets hit, it will pause at that certain point in time, and I can debug my test using a DevTools application or within the IDE. So let me try to pull that off. OK, so that is pretty small. Let's increase that. So if you open a DevTools application, you press on the green Node button on the top left, and then it waits until the debugger statement gets hit. And that happens when I exit the debugging state, the debug command from WebdriverIO. So then it hits this debugger state point, and I can go into the console and have my browser variable right here, and can look for elements before I even write my test. So let's say H1s, I would want to see all H1s, and I map over them and say, get me the text of all these H1s. And I get all the H1s of the sourcecon.com page. And the way I like to build my tests, instead of writing blindly in my test spec files about the elements that I assume to be there, I use this DevTools application to just fiddle around what elements are there, what elements are not there. And I can be like, OK, so is there an element that an A-link or a tag link that has schedule in it? And there is. I have a value in there. And then, OK, can I click on that? It can. Is there an element, is there an H4, I think, that has the text keynote 1 in there? Can I click it? Yes. And it opens me the talk from Simon from yesterday. So this is really useful. And I had a conversation yesterday with someone that who tried to find a selector in Appium. And Appium takes some time until the whole device has booted up. And this person had always, restart the script, who has to reboot the application to try to find a new selector in her test script. And so what I was proposing to her, use the debug command and use the debug capabilities to just fiddle around on the DevTools and see what's there and what's not. And if you close that, the test would continue and would execute eventually. All right. I want to use the last minutes of this talk to talk a little bit about the new fancy version 5 of WebdriverIO. I started working on it last December, and as I did with all major version upgrades, I just put everything and threw it away and tried to build it the new way, the new modern way. But what I did also is I went to the GitHub thread channel and posted an issue and was asking you guys, hey, what do you guys wish that could be implemented in version 5? Where are the bottlenecks in your test automation scripts? Where do you guys would wish that there would be improvement? And I got a lot of really great feedback. And if you still have ideas, you can go to this thread and post it there. I'm really happy to see what you guys come up with. to improve the framework. From the technical part, the first thing I did is I took every package that we have built so far in the WebdriverIO ecosystem and moved it into one big monorepo. The reason for that is I wanted to make it easier to work on features that require multiple packages, that requires to change code in multiple packages. So it was easier for people to start contributing and working with the project. I also wanted to streamline the test and publish process of all these packages. So I hope that with version 5, everyone, no matter what kind of node skill you have, will be able to contribute something to the project. That's really important. The next thing I did is I split up the main WebdriverIO package into 3 sub-packages. There's one WebDriver, there will be one WebdriverIO, and one WDIO CLI. What WebDriver is doing, it wraps every command that was ever defined in any specification into an object that you can use to do the HTTP calls. So there are JSON configurations for the Appium specification, like all Appium commands, all WebDriver commands, all JSON wire protocol commands, and all mobile JSON wire protocol commands. And all what this package is doing, it allows you to call these commands and make an HTTP request. Nothing else. It checks if the parameters that you put in are correct, but that's it. It's really low level, non-opinionated, and should just give you the baseline for do something with a browser or with a mobile device. Then we will use WebdriverIO to create action commands that wrap these protocol commands in a meaningful way, that make it easier for you to use the commands and run your test with. There's a great example, for instance, drag and drop. Right now, I think the best way to do a drag and drop emulation is to use the action commands. But to figure out what parameters you have to give the action command to do an actual drag and drop is kind of difficult because we don't read the spec every day and know what we have to do. It's kind of not documented, or it is documented, but it's not easy to understand, let's say. And WebdriverIO will take the action command, or will require you to give 2 selectors, and all the heavy lifting is done in the backend that you don't need to care about. Then there will be the WDIO CLI tool that you would usually then download to run your test runner with. So that tool will give you the test runner and all the stuff that you have right now in WebdriverIO. It also will make your commands synchronous because you don't want to deal with promises in your test code. But of course, there's a high demand, or usually developers sometimes want to use async await. That's no problem. You can just turn it off manually. But there's more. We will create certain scopes for different types of elements you want to deal with. So there will be the browser scope where you can call the URL command, or where you can call session commands on. But there will be an element scope where only commands will be registered that are applicable for elements, like get text or get HTML or click or that kind of stuff. And I want to introduce a window scope that makes it easier to change windows and tabs and to jump into a frame just by passing in an URL or a title of that frame. So it should be easier to deal with all these elements. I also want to streamline the API for sync and async usage because I see there's a lot of people that still want to use WebdriverIO with async and await. And right now, the API is not quite the same because I built a lot of fancy stuff on the synchronous mode API, and we want to streamline this. And I don't want to require you to download fibers, which is responsible for making all these commands synchronously. If you don't use synchronous mode, you should not be concerned about downloading fibers. Next to stale element retries that already is implemented in WebdriverIO right now, we will have fixes for stuff like element is not clickable at XY. Usually that happens when some element is laying over another element that you targeted, or the element is just not active in any way. And this can be fixed by scrolling, bringing this element into the view, and then try to reclick it. So WebdriverIO will have capabilities to retry these errors and try to mitigate them, so you don't have to deal with that kind of stuff. We will keep some deprecated commands like scroll and drag and drop because of the high demand. We will create, of course, a new website with a polished API and tutorials. But there's one more thing. I think every presentation should have such a slide. There's one more thing, and I'm really excited about that one. Right now, we have reporters and services as kind of plugins in WebdriverIO. With version 5, I want to introduce something that is called runners. And with runners, I want to make it possible to run your test in any arbitrary environment that is possible. The default type of runner that you usually would use is the local runner. And the local runner spawns up the processes on your local machine that does all the HTTP requests to the WebDriver endpoint, all on your local machine. But I want to create something, and I already did, a Lambda runner, because everything is serverless these days. I think why not run your tests on a server on AWS somewhere? The good thing about this is you can scale all your tests basically endlessly. You just trigger the Lambda command with some parameters, and it runs the test somewhere in the cloud for you. Either you connect it to Source Labs with a Source Connect tunnel, or you run just Chrome driver and run Chrome headlessly. Doesn't matter. My goal is to literally be able to just trigger the test command, and there's 1,000 tests that run in concurrency, so that your test time is always as low as the longest test goes in your test suite. I have already a beta version running of that, and I can demo it to you, but there's a lot of stuff that has to be done until I get to release this. OK, at the end, some disclaimers. You can find all API docs on WebdriverIO, as you know. If you have questions or any problems, there's a GitHub channel, and we have right now over 2,500 people being there and helping everyone, which is really great. There's an online learning course, learn.webdriver.io. It's made by a guy called Kevin Lamping. And this guy has also a lot of great material on his YouTube page. I think he does every once in a while a WebdriverIO Wednesday, where he goes into some details into how you build certain stuff with WebdriverIO, how you build your own reporters, your own services. There's great content out there. And last but not least, thank you for listening to my talk. Thank you for using WebdriverIO and for being a great community. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, we have time for questions.
So the solution for when an element's not clickable because something's on top of it, so you're going to actually build a retry into the API. So
exactly
the stuff I'm doing to get around that I don't have to do anymore.
Yeah. Not only element is not clickable, there are a variety of things that are annoying and that can happen that might not even be your fault. It's like an automation problem on the driver side that probably cannot really be fixed.
Right.
And by retrying or trying workarounds, WebDriver can handle that, and you don't have to deal with it anymore.
OK. And then the Actions API, once that's actually implemented in the drivers, are we going to WebDriver going to wrap that so it's easier? Cool. And
so the Action API takes like a lot of parameters that required for certain actions. It allows really a variety of emulations on your page or mobile app. And instead of passing like really complex arguments into the action commands, I try to build like command that wraps up and makes it easier to use.
Perfect. Awesome. I think that's it. Yeah.
Any others?
Hey, hi. So I'm using the version 4. So if I want to move it to the version 5, is there any APIs that got deprecated which I need to take care?
I haven't really decided yet what commands will be deprecated, but I think I can come up with a service that allows you to use the old commands also in version 5, and they just get redirected or reused. So I try to make it possible that you don't have to do that much updating of your test, but I cannot promise anything that it will be. It should be easy, but I cannot promise anything yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions?
So I feel like the debugging with either the IDE or dev tools, I feel like it's not very stable sometimes. Like when I change node versions, it's kind of fragile. Is it something to do with WebdriverIO or is the inspector of Node?
Hard to tell. I don't want to blame Node in this situation, but I'm currently running Node 6, where it is the best, where it is really good, stable. And I don't know about the other Node versions, but I can look into it to make it work in other Node versions as well. I'm not sure it was a weird error that I couldn't explain by myself either.
Thank you.
But yeah, there's next to using dev tools in the IDE, you can always use the debug command to type in your commands on the console.
Oh.
I'm curious how much you've built in retrying already, or built in weights and things like that. How much is that already built in?
Currently, there's only a stale element retry. So that can happen if you, for instance, query an element and you reload the page, then WebDriver loses the connection to that element. So your element ID is not valid anymore. And WebDriver captures that and just requeries the element for you. That's the only auto fix that we have right now. But then there will be the other ones in the future.
Thank you.
Any more? We have a couple more minutes, I think, right? Christian?
Huh?
Minutes on the clock there.
4 minutes.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.